I wasn't even supposed to be there. Emma told me it was a casual coffee with colleagues. The kind of harmless after-hours thing I never got invited to, and honestly, I didn't usually mind. I'm not a corporate type. I run a small vintage restoration business out of our garage. She's in strategy and development for some tech-adjacent firm I can never fully remember the name of. It was one of those offices that always had neon signs on their walls and kombucha on tap, where everyone wore expensive sneakers and called meetings collisions. Not really my crowd. But that night, something didn't sit right. I couldn't tell you why exactly. Maybe it was how she lingered over her reflection longer than usual, smoothing her hair even after it looked perfect. Or how she left wearing the lipstick I always said I liked, even though she'd laughed and said she thought it was too loud for the office. Or maybe it was that strange hesitation before she said goodbye. The half-second pause, like she was debating whether to kiss me or not. In the end, she didn't. "Just a quick coffee," she said, reaching for her phone. "Ryan's hosting. You know Ryan, the analyst guy I told you about? He's harmless. Probably just an excuse for him to flex his new bonus." That was the first time I'd heard his name in a while, even though he used to come up more often. Emma used to tell me all kinds of work stories, casually dropping people's names, and I'd nod along, pretending I understood the office dynamics. But Ryan's name had quietly disappeared over the last month or two, like someone edited him out of the script, so I told myself I'd just swing by. No drama. Just drop off the scarf she'd left in my truck. She said the place was in a high-rise near River North, just off the Magnificent Mile. I told myself I wouldn't stay long. Just show my face, say a quick hello, maybe grab a cup of whatever was brewing, and leave. But the moment I stepped out of that elevator, I knew I'd walked into something I wasn't meant to see. The lounge on the 34th floor wasn't a coffee shop. It was more like a dimly lit bar posing as a co-working space. Dark leather seating, low music, exposed brick. The kind of place where networking came with cocktails and complicated intentions. There weren't more than 10 or 12 people in the room, but it only took a glance to find her. Emma was in the back, in a curved booth beneath a hanging brass light fixture. She wasn't surrounded by a group. It was just her and Ryan. Her hand was resting casually on his knee, not in motion, not adjusting herself, just there like it belonged, like it had been there a while. I stopped walking. My stomach dropped before my brain caught up. From where I stood, I could see everything. The faint lipstick smudge on Ryan's collar, coral pink, unmistakable. The exact shade Emma had insisted was too daring for a weekday. I'd bought it for her myself at a makeup counter last month. She said she might save it for our anniversary. And on the small table in front of them sat a white hotel room card holder, folded open. Room number printed on one side. On the other, a single line scribbled in pen. "Tonight, after 9. I remember staring at that card and thinking, there's no way this is what it looks like. But even as the thought crossed my mind, Emma looked up and saw me. Her eyes widened, not in surprise, not even in guilt. It was calculation, a flicker of emotion that vanished almost instantly. Her posture changed, her smile adjusted, and she picked up her phone without missing a beat. Within seconds, she snapped a photo with 3 people at a nearby table, people I hadn't even noticed before. She posted it to her story, a blurry, laughing group sh*t with the caption, "Work fam time hot beverage white heart." While I stood there, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. "Emma, hey babe, don't overthink. Just office humor. You're reading too much into it." Grinning face with sweat briefcase. "Just office humor." Meanwhile, Ryan adjusted his shirt collar like it had just occurred to him there might be something on it. He didn't make eye contact with me. Neither of them waved me over. Nobody stood up. I took a step forward, then stopped. My heart was racing, but everything felt slow. Too quiet. I could hear the clink of glasses from the bar, the low murmur of conversation from other tables. I suddenly became hyper-aware of how out of place I looked. Jeans, boots, carrying a scarf I'd meant to give to my wife. My feet felt glued to the ground. I wanted to believe her. I really did. I wanted to chalk it all up to some corporate in-joke, to weird office culture I didn't understand. I wanted to believe that the lipstick was from a hug, that the hotel card was part of a raffle giveaway, that her hand had just landed there for a moment too long. But I've always been good at reading rooms, and what I saw wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a joke. It was int asterisk Macy. Comfort. Familiarity. When someone's hand rests on someone else's knee like that, it's because it's been there before. I slowly backed away, still gripping the scarf. I didn't even say her name. I just left the lounge and took the elevator back down to the street, heart pounding in my ears, Emma's message still open on my screen. The text stared back at me like it had all the answers. Just office humor. Later that night, she doubled down. Sent me another message with a second group photo, this one carefully curated, Emma smiling with 3 women from her team, one of whom I recognized vaguely from a holiday party last year. She followed it up with, "You really overreacted. I don't want to fight about this. You're being paranoid, Nick." Paranoid. That's what she said. Like I'd imagined the lipstick. Like I'd dreamed up the hand on Ryan's leg. Like I'd somehow invented a hotel room card holder that had the exact same slanted cursive Emma uses when she's rushing. She didn't apologize. She didn't even ask if I was okay. She just told me I was overreacting. Like the whole situation was a test I had failed. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my workshop, surrounded by half-finished restorations. A brass pendulum clock, a busted cuckoo that had been on my bench for weeks. Normally, working calms me down. There's something therapeutic about fixing what's broken. But that night, nothing helped. I kept replaying the scene in my head. The curve of her hand, the flash of pink lipstick, the sudden calculated pivot. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't some heat-of-the-moment thing. It was orchestrated, deflected, managed. She wasn't caught off guard. She was ready for it. The thing about suspicion is, it doesn't usually arrive all at once. Creeps in, quiet, incremental, like water leaking under floorboards. You don't notice the damage until something gives way. After that night in the high-rise lounge, I tried to give Emma the benefit of the doubt. I really did. I spent the weekend telling myself I must have misunderstood. Maybe the hotel card was part of some promotional thing. Maybe the lipstick was innocent. Maybe the hand on Ryan's knee meant less than I thought. But that voice in my head, the one that had helped me steer clear of bad clients, shady deals, and dodgy salesmen for years, it wouldn't shut up. And once I started paying attention, everything that had felt off for months suddenly snapped into focus. First were the absences. Emma used to come home by 6, 7 if traffic was bad. But lately, she'd been rolling in closer to 9, sometimes later. She always had a reason. Team debrief, client extension, strategy rollout. It became a running joke. One she leaned into so hard, it started to feel rehearsed. "Hope the cat hasn't forgotten what I look like," she'd say, walking in with a laugh. But when I'd ask who stayed late with her, she always gave vague answers. You know, just the usual crew. But one evening, I ran into one of her coworkers at a charity function. A guy named Pete I'd met before. We made small talk and I mentioned Emma's late nights. He looked confused for a beat, then said, "Oh yeah? I thought she was on the early shift lately." That was the first drop in the bucket. The next came from social media. Emma wasn't much of an oversharer, but she posted enough. I started paying attention to the background of her pictures. One story showed her sipping wine, candlelight in the corner of the frame. She captioned it "Post-pitch unwind wineglass." But when I looked closer, I noticed a man's blazer draped over the back of the chair opposite hers. It was navy with those distinct notched lapels, the kind Ryan always wore. Same cut, same texture. Another time, she posted a photo of a meeting whiteboard with half-erased notes and doodles on it. What caught my eye wasn't the content. It was the handwriting. The marker scribbles matched Ryan's. I'd seen his work once when he visited our place for a game night a while back. He labeled his beer cup in neat, overly precise print. Same blocky R's. Same slanted A's. Individually, none of it would have held up in court. But together, it painted a picture. And it wasn't the one Emma was trying to sell me. I started noticing how she was avoiding things. She'd skip events that had once meant a lot to both of us. She missed my nephew's violin recital, the one she promised she wouldn't. Claimed she had food poisoning, but I found an Uber receipt in our shared expense tracker for that night. 9:13 p.m. Luxury SUV, drop-off at an address downtown. Not a hospital. Not our home. Another time, she was supposed to meet me at the local craft fair. I had a booth set up, selling handmade clocks and restored barometers. She texted at the last minute, saying she was swamped and couldn't make it. Later that week, while syncing our grocery list on the app, I saw she'd bought a bouquet of lilies at a florist in Old Town. Time-stamped that same afternoon. Same neighborhood as the fair. No explanation. No mention. And then there were the jokes. They started subtly, little jabs in front of friends. "Nick's too sensitive," she'd say, laughing. "He gets paranoid if I'm 5 minutes late." Or, "Don't ask Nick to plan a trip. He overthinks the weather report like it's a science experiment." First, I laughed along. Relationships come with teasing, right? But the jokes started coming more often. They stopped being playful. They felt like cover fire, something to make me look ridiculous, just in case I ever started asking real questions. Worse, she only made them around others. When we were alone, she didn't joke. She didn't say much at all. It was like living with a ghost of her former self, present in body, but emotionally elsewhere. She stopped asking about my day. Stopped noticing when I shaved or didn't. Her goodnight kisses turned mechanical. Half the time, she'd fall asleep scrolling through her phone. Screen turned away from me. One night, I woke up to find her standing in the hallway in the dark, whispering into her phone. I didn't call her out on it. I just said her name softly. She jumped, fumbled, claimed she was listening to a podcast and didn't want to wake me. Her screen showed the call log. She quickly turned it off. From that point on, I started documenting everything. I didn't want to become one of those guys who lost his mind over suspicions and torched a marriage by accident. But I also wasn't going to let myself be gaslit into inaction. I started saving copies of our shared expense reports, limo rides, wine bars, late-night food delivery receipts to addresses I didn't recognize. I exported copies of her calendar when she left it open on our shared tablet. I started keeping track of where she said she'd be, and where she actually was, and slowly patterns began to emerge. One recurring detail stood out: Ryan Hale. His name popped up in dinner reservations, in receipt memos, on Venmo charges labeled things like emergency file drop and gratuity. I checked his Instagram, public of course, with the kind of curated polish that said, "I care about branding." He'd posted a boomerang from a rooftop bar, Emma's sleeve clearly visible beside him, same jacket she told me she left at the dry cleaners. And then I started finding her stuff in places it didn't belong. A silk scarf, the one she wore to our anniversary dinner last year, draped over the back of a chair in my workshop. She'd never worn it in there. She didn't even like the smell of varnish. One of my screwdrivers from a set my father gave me, missing from its case. Found it 2 days later inside her tote bag. She said she was tightening a drawer at work. I asked which drawer. She didn't answer. The clincher was the workshop repair log. I kept it mostly analog, a habit from before I digitized the business. Every time a piece came in, I'd record the client's name, the item, the date. One morning, I noticed a new entry had been added in pencil. Ryan Hale, wall clock, ordered by Emma. But I didn't write that. The handwriting was neat, tidy, not mine. Emma doesn't know how to use that log. That's when it all stopped being speculation. It wasn't just distance or coldness or miscommunication anymore. It was coordination. It was hiding. It was double standards and shadow movements and plausible deniability stretched past the breaking point. And the worst part? I still wanted to believe there might be an explanation. That somehow I was wrong. That this wasn't what it looked like. That I was spiraling. That I'd watched too many detective shows and let my imagination run wild. But that night when I brought it up, gently, calmly even, Emma didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it either. She just stared at me for a long moment and said, "Nick, I can't do this if you're going to interrogate me every time I step outside the house. And then she walked out. No apology. No reassurance. No effort to close the gap. Just distance. Just secrecy. Just silence. And in that silence, something broke. The truth doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up in a quiet notification. A timestamp. A slip of handwriting that doesn't belong. Something small that shatters everything. After that last argument, Emma and I spent 3 days barely speaking. The apartment felt like a museum of things we no longer recognized. 2 toothbrushes, 2 mugs, 2 sides of the bed. I tried to stay busy, burying myself in work. My workshop had always been my refuge, a place where broken things could be made whole again. But now, even that space felt violated. Her perfume lingered on one of the coats she'd hung by the door weeks ago. Her scarf, the same one I'd found draped over a chair, was still folded on my workbench. I couldn't bring myself to move it. I told myself I was done looking for signs, that I would wait for her to tell me the truth. But deep down, I already knew she wouldn't. So I started gathering proof, not to confront her, not yet, but because I needed to be certain. Certainty had become the only thing keeping me sane. That's when I discovered the first undeniable clue. Every employee at her firm used a corporate keycard for access, entry, exit, and office floors. A few years ago, I'd helped her set up an auto-reporting feature that sent work summaries to her inbox. She'd linked it to our shared laptop, and apparently, she'd forgotten to unlink it. One morning, while checking emails, a notification appeared in the corner of the screen. Employee exit, 3:12 a.m. Location, HQ level 18. Her office closed at midnight. I double-checked. The timestamp was from 2 nights earlier. A night she'd claimed she was staying with a friend after finishing late and drinking a little too much to drive. At first, I told myself maybe she'd just stayed behind with coworkers. But something about the precision of that 3:12 burned into me. Nobody lingers at work until 3 in the morning. Not in an office that shuts down at 12 sharp. The next blow came later that afternoon, from an unexpected source. Our neighbor, Mrs. Clark. She lived 2 floors down in Emma's old apartment building. The one she'd kept when she moved in with me, just for convenience during busy weeks. We'd always been friendly, exchanging small talk about repairs and packages. That day, she called to say she'd seen Emma. She was up late that night, Mrs. Clark said casually. Came in around 3 with a man, tall, dark suit. Same one from her Christmas party pictures. She paused. Didn't mean to pry, dear. But they looked close. I thanked her, my throat tightening. I didn't tell her she'd just confirmed what I already suspected. Still, I needed something concrete. Not hearsay, not speculation. So that evening, I went back to my workshop. I flipped open my repair log, the same one I'd noticed a few strange entries in weeks before. And there it was again, right near the top of the page. Client, Ryan Hale. Item, wall clock. Ordered by Emma. The handwriting was neat and deliberate, but it wasn't mine. Emma had no reason to be adding entries. And worse, the item listed wasn't just any wall clock. It was my grandfather's antique Morbier, one of the last family pieces I had. I hadn't seen it in weeks, but I'd assumed I'd moved it to storage during a renovation. I felt cold all over. I started checking around the workshop, drawers, shelves, crates. The Morbier was gone. So was one of my packing crates, and when I searched the shipment log, there it was again. A courier record from 3 nights ago, addressed to a name that made my stomach twist. Recipient, Ryan Hale. Destination, San Francisco. Weight, 12. 4 kilograms. Description, clock, antique. That's when everything clicked. It wasn't just emotional betrayal anymore. It was theft. Physical, tangible proof that she wasn't just lying to me. She was taking pieces of my life with her. My hands shook as I scrolled through the records. There was a signature on the shipment slip. Emma's. Same looping E, same slanted M. I checked the timestamp. 2:58 a.m. The same night she'd stayed at her friend's. The same night she'd left the office at 3:12 a.m. She hadn't been working late. She'd been sending my grandfather's clock to another man. For a while, I just sat there, staring at the screen, waiting for my brain to catch up. 1,000 thoughts collided. Anger, heartbreak, disbelief, a strange detached curiosity. I kept thinking about how carefully she must have planned it. How she'd used my own system, my own records, my own handwriting template to forge the entry. How easily she must have moved through my space, confident I'd never notice. The next morning, I called the courier service. I told them I'd made a mistake in the shipment, that it needed to be rerouted or returned. The woman on the phone checked the tracking number, then said politely, "I'm sorry, sir, but the package has already been delivered." Delivered. Signed for. Hail R. My chest felt tight. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I tried calling Emma, but she didn't answer. Instead, she texted half an hour later. "Can't talk right now. Big presentation. Please don't spiral." Spiral. That word. She used it like a shield. A way to make me doubt myself, to rewrite the story before it even left her mouth. But this time, there was no interpretation left to twist. There was a record, a shipment, a signature, proof that she had not only crossed the line, but dragged a piece of my history with her. That night, I didn't confront her. I didn't even mention the clock. I just sat in the dark, thinking about all the tiny details I'd ignored. The business cards in her purse, the perfume that wasn't hers, the quiet phone calls in the hallway. I thought about how much effort it must take to live two lives, to lie so smoothly that even the person who knows you best starts doubting their own senses. At some point, I walked back to my workshop. The space felt emptier than ever. Tools perfectly aligned, projects half finished. The faint ticking of clocks filling the silence. But the Morbier's chime, that low, resonant tone that had always marked the hour, was gone. The absence of that sound felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. That's when it hit me. There was no longer any ambiguity. Whatever hope I'd been clinging to, that this was misunderstanding or miscommunication, it was gone. Emma had taken something from me, both literally and metaphorically, and sent it to another man. And for the first time since this whole thing began, I wasn't angry. I was numb. Numb and clear-headed in a way I hadn't been for months. Because once you see the truth, really see it, there's no going back. You can't unsee the lipstick or the hand on the knee or the courier slip with your name replaced by someone else's. You can't unhear the quiet click of betrayal as it locks into place. By the time the sun came up, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to accuse her or beg her for honesty. I wasn't going to let her twist the narrative again. I was going to follow the trail. Every shipment, every record, every trace she'd left behind, until I had the full story. If Emma wanted to vanish behind a web of excuses, I'd dismantle it piece by piece. The clock was gone, but time wasn't on her side anymore. I flew to San Francisco 2 days later. It wasn't a decision I made out of impulse or revenge. It wasn't even about catching her in the act anymore. It was about confirmation. About finally standing inside the space where her secrets lived and seeing for myself what was left behind when someone decides to vanish midlife. I'd spent the last few days gathering what little remained: bank statements, calendar reminders, a forgotten post-it note on the fridge with a scribbled address and flight time, left behind like a clue in a badly cleaned crime scene. She hadn't even tried to cover her tracks anymore. In hindsight, I don't think she needed to. She'd already made the decision to disappear. All I was doing was catching up. Her apartment was located in a high-rise near Nob Hill, a place she once described as her reset button when we first got together. She used to live there during her post-grad years. Before me, before our shared Google Calendar and Sundays at the flea market and mugs with matching initials. I told the doorman I was her husband. He looked me over like he wanted to ask questions but didn't. He just nodded slowly and let me in. "She hasn't been back in a few days," he said. "Left a couple boxes for pickup, but that's about it." When I stepped into her apartment, the first thing that hit me was the emptiness. Not the kind of emptiness that comes from someone running out to grab groceries. This was curated, intentional. Her apartment wasn't just vacant, it was wiped, like she'd vacuumed her life out of it. The walls were bare, every framed print and photograph gone. Just faint outlines on the paint where they used to hang. The shelves were empty except for a single half-burned candle and a cracked coffee mug. One we bought at a street market in Lisbon 4 years ago. I turned it over in my hand and found a faded lipstick stain still pressed into the rim. Her lipstick, that same bold coral. The fridge was cleaned out. No magnets. No grocery lists. Just one bottle of almond milk and a near-empty jar of capers. The only food in the place was a takeout bag from an upscale sushi place, receipt dated 2 nights ago, the same night the clock was delivered. The only name on the bill was hers. No second drink. No Ryan. But I wasn't fooled. That apartment wasn't lived in. It was staged like a hotel room made to feel personal. Except everything personal had already been pulled. Her bathroom drawers were empty. Makeup bags gone. Hairbrush gone. The travel pouch I gave her last Christmas wasn't there. She didn't just pack. She evacuated. I opened the closet. 3 wire hangers. A broken sandal. 1 winter coat that didn't fit her anymore. Nothing else. On the dresser sat a single printed email, folded in half. It was an itinerary. From a shipping company. The recipient was Ryan Hale. The sender, Emma Gray. The weight matched the antique clock. The destination matched the courier slip I found in my workshop. The shipment date was 1 day before I arrived. I stared at the paper like it might suddenly offer context. But it didn't. It was just another receipt. Another breadcrumb she'd left behind. Not by accident, but almost as if she wanted me to find it. A breadcrumb trail with no ending. The next day, I went to the storage unit facility she'd rented on the outskirts of the city. The address came from a rental payment charge on our old joint card. A small amount I almost missed. I only caught it because the facility's name was listed in all lowercase, wedged between a Spotify subscription and an airline baggage fee. I brought the receipt with me to the site. The clerk at the front desk barely looked up. Unit 1472, he said, sliding me a key. It's a short-term lease. Ends next week. The unit was about the size of a walk-in closet. Cold. Concrete. The light flickered as I stepped inside. Inside were 4 crates. 2 were sealed tight, taped and labeled with Emma's name. The other 2 were open, filled with items from the apartment. Books, kitchenware, folded bedsheets, one of my hoodies. There was no pattern, no logic to what she'd taken or left behind. It was like she'd picked up her life in chunks and moved the pieces she thought she could get away with. Among the clutter, I found a small jewelry box. Not expensive. One of those handmade ones with felt lining and a broken clasp. Inside was the silver locket I gave her on our 2nd anniversary. I clicked it open. The picture inside was still there. The 2 of us at Lake Geneva, wind in our hair, her smile tilted like she was in on some secret. Took me a second to remember that version of her. Next to it, stuffed into a plastic sleeve, was a birth certificate. But not hers. The name said Amy Thorne, born in Florida. Same birth year as Emma. Different parents. A different city. The photo ID paperclipped to the back showed Emma's face, or someone who looked just like her, with darker hair and heavier makeup. The signature at the bottom was hers, though, no doubt. I stared at the photo for a long time, unable to move. This wasn't just a cover name. This was an identity. My wife, the woman I had shared a bed with, made dinner for, kissed goodnight, had an alternate life carefully tucked away in a climate-controlled storage unit on the other side of the country. And this wasn't the only one. In a second crate, tucked beneath a shoebox full of receipts, I found a red leather pouch. Inside were more documents. Some laminated. Some fake. Some possibly real. There were 5 different state IDs. 2 passports. 1 social security card with a name I'd never seen before. Bank cards. Rental agreements. Leases. All pointing to addresses from Seattle to Miami. All neatly arranged. Color-coded. Filed. And twice, just twice, the name Emma Gray appeared again, but with different birthplaces, different parent names, different histories, all leading to dead ends. Among the documents was a single note. No greeting, no signature, just a short message, printed on folded stationery I recognized from our kitchen drawer back home. You looked too far. Please stop. E. No threat. No apology. Just a warning. Her handwriting was unmistakable. That clean, looping E, the slanted R. She had written the note deliberately, like she expected this moment, like she planned for me to arrive right here, holding a locket in one hand and a false identity in the other. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there on the floor of the storage unit, surrounded by the wreckage of someone else's life, or maybe a life I was never allowed to fully know. It hit me, not all at once, but in pieces. She hadn't just cheated on me with another man. She cheated on the idea of who she was supposed to be. The infidelity wasn't just physical. It was structural. She had stolen time, space, objects, names. She hadn't simply run away. She had rewritten herself. And in that rewriting, she'd tried to erase me. But I was still here. And now, so was the truth. I didn't sleep after the storage unit. I sat on the floor for what felt like hours, my back pressed against cold concrete, staring at the sealed crates like they might whisper something if I waited long enough. Eventually, I got up, closed the door behind me, and left the unit the way I found it. Undisturbed, save for the rearranged items and that red leather pouch now zipped inside my jacket. I walked the city for a while, through fog, through noise, through the illusion that anything in my life had been solid. Then, without ceremony, I texted Ryan. I still had his number. He gave it to me once at a birthday party, back when he was just the smart guy at Emma's office who liked vintage watches. I never thought I'd use it, and I never imagined the first message I'd send would be so simple. We need to talk. In person. I didn't expect him to reply, but he did. 2 hours later. Fine. Meet me at the office tomorrow morning. 9 sharp. Bring whatever this is about. No denial. No, hey man, what's this about? Just instructions, short, clipped, and exhausted. I had the feeling I wasn't the only one Emma had left confused. The next day, I walked through the tall glass doors of his company's San Francisco office. Sleek, modern, designed to impress. The receptionist looked up before I even introduced myself. You must be Nick, she said. Not a question. She handed me a guest badge already printed with my name. That was the first sign something wasn't right. Not with me, but with him. I was escorted through a labyrinth of frosted glass partitions and quiet, professional-looking people pretending not to eavesdrop. Ryan's office was at the end of the hall. Big windows, clean desk, no personal clutter, just a photo of a mountain trail and a stack of folders so neatly aligned it looked intentional. He stood when I walked in. He looked worse than I expected, paler, thinner. The Ryan I remembered always had a bounce to him, the kind of smug confidence people mistake for charm. But now he just looked worn down. Nick, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Let's not waste time. I sat, not out of respect, but because I wanted to see what his version of the truth looked like. She lied to me too, he said, before I even opened my mouth. Whatever you think happened between us, it wasn't what it looked like. Or maybe it was, but it wasn't real. He ran a hand through his hair, then opened a drawer and pulled out a small white envelope. This came 2 weeks ago, he said, sliding it across the desk. She called it a gift, said it was a family heirloom from her grandfather, said it had to be delivered urgently. I opened it. Inside was a printed shipping slip, the same one I'd seen in my records. The Morbier clock. My clock. She told me it was sentimental, Ryan said quietly. Said it reminded her of her childhood. That she wanted it in a safe place. She made me promise I wouldn't open the crate. You didn't ask why she didn't ship it to her own name? I asked. He gave a humorless laugh. I did. She said she was in between places and that she trusted me more than anyone. Said she couldn't risk it getting lost. Did you believe her? I wanted to, he admitted. I thought she was running from something. I didn't know what. But after everything, I started checking. He tapped a keyboard. A screen behind him lit up, displaying security logs. This, he said, pointing, is from 2 nights ago. The footage showed the office lobby at 11:43 p.m. Emma walked in, alone at first, but was quickly joined by a man I didn't recognize. Not Ryan. Not a coworker I'd seen in any photos. Someone else entirely. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, a baseball cap pulled low. They didn't touch, but they moved like they'd done this before. They used the executive meeting room, Ryan said, zooming the footage. Soundproof. No cameras inside. They stayed there for 2 hours. I wasn't here. No one was. My throat went dry. After that, I told her it was over, Ryan continued. Blocked her number. Had the crate removed. I didn't open it. I just had it placed in a third-party storage facility, in case things got messy. He opened another drawer, pulled out a business card, and slid it across the desk. That's the location. Units under my name. You'll need ID to claim it, but I already called ahead. They'll release it to you. I stared at the card for a long time. Why are you giving me this? I asked finally. Ryan looked me straight in the eye. Because I think we were both played. And because I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. He leaned back, exhaling hard. She told me she was divorced, he said quietly. Said you were some ex who kept showing up in old memories. I never even knew you were together until I saw your name on one of her shared documents by accident. I confronted her. She said it was a paperwork mix-up. He shook his head. I should have walked away then, but I didn't. I let her charm me, and then I let her lie. There was something about his voice that rang true. Not the tone of a guilty man. More like someone trying to scrub off the residue of something they couldn't name. I didn't thank him. I didn't offer forgiveness or understanding. I just stood up, took the business card, and left. Outside, the city buzzed like nothing had changed. Cabs honked. People argued on the phone. Dogs barked at pigeons. The world didn't care that my wife had forged identities, staged exits, and lied to everyone she knew. I took a cab to the storage location Ryan had given me. Industrial district. Big gates. Security cameras on every corner. Inside, the manager nodded when I showed my ID and the card. Ryan said you'd come, he muttered, leading me down a long corridor. Unit 9C. Still sealed. The door opened with a heavy groan. There it was. The crate. My grandfather's Morbier clock, or what was left of it, was wrapped in coarse canvas. Dusted. Unopened. On top of it was a sticker. Do not open. But I did. Not because I wanted closure, but because I already knew I wouldn't find it there. I just wanted the last lie to be exposed. What I found wasn't just a disassembled clock. The back panel had been unscrewed. Inside the hollowed-out cavity was the red pouch I'd seen earlier in the storage unit. Only now it had more. More documents. More names. A USB drive labeled H.R. West. A sealed envelope addressed to no one. And, tucked in the back, another note. This one was handwritten, not typed. Just like the one from before. If you're reading this, I'm already gone. I'm sorry you had to see this. But not sorry I left. It wasn't signed. But I didn't need it to be. I stood there in that cold, windowless room, surrounded by silence and the scattered fragments of a story that no longer made sense. Emma hadn't just lied to Ryan. She'd lied to me, to everyone. And yet, despite everything I'd uncovered, I still couldn't shake the feeling that I was only scratching the surface. Inside the clock's hollow was a pouch packed with forged IDs, bank cards, and passports, each under different names, some with Emma's face. 2 documents still listed Emma Gray, but with different birthplaces. A final note read, "You looked too far. Please stop." Her handwriting, calm and surgical, confirmed the worst. This wasn't just cheating. It was reinvention. My wife had built a life from stolen truths. She sent a pin drop, a quiet cafe by the harbor. I didn't go to beg. I went to end it. I reclaimed the clock, photographed the forged documents, forwarded copies to Ryan, and filed theft reports. I changed every lock, installed cameras, and met with a lawyer. That night, I rehung the Morbier. Ticking no longer haunted me. It counted something new, truth, peace, and the slow, steady rhythm of starting over on my terms.